Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Kayleen. I do reviews of graphic books because I wrote a graphic memoir entitled Mom Remembers Me. I'm working on publishing it now. Right now it's December 10th of 2023, a couple days after my birthday. And I wanted to encourage everybody to start reading graphic books, especially history graphic books, because, you know, when you read textbook of history, it's kind of dry. But when you see it in pictures, especially Nathan Hale has some really good books about it's all graphic history books. And then this book was excellent. I had never heard of Edith Garrud. Of course, I'd heard about women's suffrage. I actually looked up how long it actually took women in England to get the right to vote from when they started fighting and wanted the right to vote. Does anybody have any guesses? Think about it before I tell you. It took 100 years. 100 years when the women started saying, and even when they first got the right to vote, they were had to be 25 and they had to also own property, and they eventually changed all that. So this is a really good book. So this is the Bodyguard unit. I actually emailed the publishers of this book to get their permission, and they answered me and said yes, as long as I say that this is from Learner Graphics Universe. It's actually Learners. It was art by Lisa Cullen, text by Transform originally by Learner Publishing. There it is. She wanted me to make sure I say Learner Publishing Group, so that's what I'm saying. So I did read this about 2 weeks ago because I kept waiting to see if I had a good hair day before I did this video. My videos are simple. I don't know about you, but when the videos have all these things coming and going, I just think it's kind of a pain in the ass. It distracts your attention. If the speaker says waterfalls and they show a picture of a waterfall, I don't need to see a picture of a waterfall. I know what a waterfall looks like. I think that they are distracting our attention, and maybe people need it, but it bothers me. But my videos are just basic. I'm just using my camera phone and my camera on my desktop, and I put them together using Photoshop. So I've got little problems, but so it's not as fancy, but you get the information, right? So as I mentioned, this book, I learned quite a bit. And so I wanted to show you a little bit of the art and some of my favorite, what I learned from this. The art in this book is excellent. The colors are great, everything about it. I like colors, the books that have colors. So, and then this was kind of interesting. So England believed that Asia was inferior, so jiu-jitsu was considered harmless. So that's why when Edith Garrud started teaching jiu-jitsu, they didn't harass her until they started to realize that jiu-jitsu was more than they possibly thought it, because they thought it was non-combative. But she ended up teaching the Bodyguard unit to protect the women's suffrage, because the police officers didn't just stop the women from protesting, they actually beat them. Just like you've seen plenty of other stories of police with the march, with the Lewis March. The police didn't just stop them; they beat them up. And then this woman, Edith Garrud, in the end of this book, she did a lot of things just to be smart. You know, she made it more difficult for the police to come in and get the women's suffrage during some of their presentations. So then here's the next page that I wanted to go over, and something that we forget how we learn to drive. Oh, okay. It's funny, like, you know, I've been driving since I was 19, so I forget that was, but when they were first starting to learn, they didn't ever drive before, so it was more of a challenge than with things that we totally forget, and especially, well, for them, I wonder about that. Does anybody know about the psychology of driving on the right side versus the left side of the road? Which is more intuitive for our brain? It feels like driving on the left side would be completely abnormal since we're always on the right, but I don't know. If anybody knows the answer to that, please let me know. I would love to know the answer. So this is when she was learning how to drive. Edith Garrud, she told them that she was driving, but she was still kind of learning. So again, the colors and the art here are excellent. I have a hard time getting this little book bookmark here. That's what I do when I read the books. I just do little bookmarks for what I want to say. You know, I read years ago that in England, why men started wearing those funky little wigs, and I think they still do at some points. They did it because they were bald, so they wanted to hire. So of course later on, when some men were not bald, they still had to wear those hair pieces because to make up for the other guys that were bald. Oh, and samurai did wear. So she also mentions you are. Oh, yeah, this is really, really good. So, I mean, just the examples of how property was more valuable than actually humans, and especially females. So she complained here that they were outraged with property damage, but not to actually what happened to the women, how they were beaten up. There's still a lot of discrimination against women. People kind of forget that. We're still fighting. I feel like I'm still fighting all the time. And this is one of my favorite spreads in this book, so I wanted to show it to you. Hope you can see it okay, right? So she's kind of like, it makes me think of Kung Fu Panda and the Furious Five and what they did, right? So that's why I wanted to show you this. A lot of times to improve my art, I'll take my favorite pieces of a book and just copy the artist, because I don't really have a style of my own yet. So I think that was my last bookmark. So as I mentioned earlier, when they were getting prepared to speaker, and the police knew that they were going to be giving a presentation, Edith Garrud just really made it difficult for the police to come in there. They used a very narrow stairway, and they put plants and everything there, and then they also hid some people in the front of the speaker, which was the famous, I'm running a blank right now what her name was that was speaking. See, so instead of they used their brain versus their brawn, and they put plants to obstruct. See, this is during the very last they were going to do it. They couldn't even see. They whacked them. The police whacked them. They didn't just stop them or carry them to jail. And then the women fought them off. They learned the jujitsu. And then they actually did some other stuff. They lined the stairs with some stuff to make so the men would just fall over. So I wanted to share that. So be smart. And this was, we suffragettes have a great mission, the greatest the world has ever known. So with that, just a short and sweet video, and I wanted to encourage you to read this book. It is an excellent book. It's a good history lesson. I enjoyed it thoroughly. And I also encourage you to start reading. I started reading graphic books when I was taking care of my mother and as a caregiver. And I encourage everybody in my book, Mom Remembers Me, to use art as some form of way to help you with your caregiving. So if your caregivee is already involved in some form of art, and it doesn't have to be drawing or painting or anything like that. It could be woodworking and jewelry making and, of course, music. See if you can get involved in that, and then you learn as well. That's what happened with me. I did draw quite a bit growing up, but as usual, you don't think I was good enough, and I stopped. And my mother even was one of the few things that she used to compliment me about. So I got back into it as a way to entertain her and me. I used to go to a lot of paint nights and just draw, and then I would have my mother look at what the instructor was painting and what was on my painting and have her test, because, looking at a picture is harder on your brain than a chess. So I think that reading the graphic books would also be really helpful and it'd be less reading, and a lot of times the fonts are larger, so maybe the elderly would have an easier time reading this. My mother wouldn't have read. She stopped reading because I think she had a hard time with concentrating and remembering and seeing and hearing, so she always wanted to be out. So that's why I went to a lot of paint nights and brought my own stuff, and then I started using an iPad, and then I learned Procreate, and then I also wanted to encourage people to use Adobe Fresco. Adobe Fresco is free, and it's got a lot of free stuff, no advertising. So thanks for listening. I hope that you do subscribe. I do fitness on this channel. I do graphic reviews of graphic books. And my next video, I'm going to share what are the ways that I help my memory using my bullet journal and my journals. I think the memory books don't really give you a lot of good techniques to improve your memory on a daily basis. They'll say, you can, if you want to remember your license plate, you can kind of figure out some little tips about, put your fingers your toes and stuff like that. But they don't really teach you what I would consider a way of making a conscious effort to remember your life. And that's what we have to do. So I'm going to do a video in all the different ways. So I do a thumbnail sketch of memory every single day. I write out my notes for my walks, who I speak to when I go out, names of bartenders, servers, conversations. I write it down, and it is time consuming, but it's the best way to remember my life and when I see them later on. So thanks a lot for listening so far. Hope you see me in another video. Bye-bye. Thanks.